another stage on of the watercolour the drawing that we looked at before, the view of Bruges. I've still got quite a long way to go with this, but what I thought I might do this morning is show you how I set about stretching this. These three smaller images I have quite deliberately decided that they're okay for me just to iron. I use a steam iron and just from the back, and they seem to have flattened down quite well, but this is a bit big for that kind of thing. So I'm proposing to stretch this. Sometimes I don't generally do that at this phase in the work, but I quite happily almost do it with an almost finished painting. And it's something it's a trick that I learned from Turner, who used to he had sort of handles put on his drawing board, the drawing board he took in the field, so that he could dip his watercolour, his finished watercolour, immerse it completely in water, which he thought was the way to sort of finish a watercolour off. It just softens everything down. There's some uncontrolled element to it, but if Turner could do it, I don't see why I shouldn't. But we haven't got that far with this painting, but I'll still show how I work on producing this bit of the process. This is another standard office product. I don't know how much longer it will be available like that. Gum strip paper. In general, I'm trying to use materials that are natural materials and turn out to be as durable as possible. But this is only a temporary part of the process. So what we need now is some water and and a shower of rain. Okay, distilled water, by the way. When you wet paper, of course, it cockles up, and then when that dries, it tightens up again. But if you can control it, which is what we're trying to do now, and you can see some of the paint is starting to run. But this paper is dampened, and when it's dry, it'll be fine for me to those little ones. Working around, not anti-clockwise as it happens, but what I'm trying to do is to avoid finding that I've got a great lump of paper which is not going to be sufficiently stretched. So around each edge in turn, rather than coming at it alternately. And then, like the cookery programs, you know, we'll have to put this in the oven and leave it. I don't want to take up too much of the image. Might have got that a bit tight. And as I say, the softening which takes place is something which I quite enjoy. It may be that you've got to control it a bit, and you may lose some pigment, and you'll see that already by even this stage in the process, some of the fine drawing has been obliterated, and I think you just have to accept that that is the way these are constructed. It's like a building with foundations under the ground. You know, they're important, but you just don't see them as part of the finished product, but they're there. And you know, the painting is a bit like that. I'm just mopping up the most of the standing water on here, trying to look in the light and see where we are with it. And this is quite a dry day, so this will dry fairly quickly, but I could almost start painting on here straight away. In fact, I'm rather tempted to do that, just to show that we can do it. Now we'll just to take a random choice. I'll just put in a bit of this foliage here. Greens, a particular case in point where you have to be extremely cautious, because if you wet them again, they will do what this maroon colour has done up here, which is they will start to spread. Some colours, as you can see, some of these terracotta type colours are much more stable and more or less stay put, and a lot of other colours just are somewhere in between. But you become aware of, and you learn how to control some of these different colours, and use the fact that they're going, you know that they're going to behave in that sort of way to good effect. Because with foliage, for instance, it's quite nice to have a sort of softness. But I've made a little bit of a rod for my own back, because I'm still probably going to want to put a fair bit into the sky. But nevertheless, that's part of the fun of this. You see how carefully I'm using my brush. No proper artist would maltreat his equipment quite this fashion. and all the time that one's doing something like this, some of the drawing is going to disappear, but not all of it. And so there we are. There are two kinds of foliage here, and I'm just trying sort of use this to show that there are trees behind that building and there's this one tree in front, so you're seeing through. But that'll have to wait until that's all dried as well. Okay. I get asked quite a bit about use of a camera, and I do use a camera, but not generally, if I can avoid it, to actually create the image or set out the composition, but rather to use as a notebook, as an aide-memoire, to remind me about the colour of paintwork on a door, or things that might not be of particular artistic importance, might not, but might be important to somebody who's commissioned you to make a painting or whatever. And then sometimes you have to rely, at least in part, on a camera, and this was a case in point, as it happens, a project which I'm working on at the moment. This is a house, a Worcestershire house, and I've been asked to make a house portrait for somebody, but they haven't lived in this house for 50 years, and they want the image to be as it was then. So I've been on site and made a careful drawing, and as you can see, made a start on putting on the first layers of wash. There were quite significant problems with getting the information of the place as it was 50 years ago. For instance, here's, if you can see some of these photographs, if I can hold it steady for you. If you look at that as an aerial photograph, you can see here is a cleared site, now occupied by a very, I've got to be careful what I say, a rather ugly apartment block. And this is also an empty site which has been built on. And at this left-hand end, there's just visible the 3-bay conservatory, which was there was there 50 years ago. That is all the information I've got to go on as to what was there, except that I'm told that there was a terrace of 19th century houses on this site. That's the totality, apart from a couple of other photographs. One which doesn't really give me anything extra on what. Let's try and hold it steady. Doesn't really give me anything extra on what we saw before, except that there were things that were different at this side of the house. So the option that we took was to take a view from this end, which hid the changes that had been made there. And they also used to drive this Austin van, and they wanted that included in the image. So I have to rely on these photographs to help me out on this, and so as you can see again from looking at this, you can see, there is the Austin starting to emerge, and here is sort of concealed in part by this flanking wall, a great sort of dodge of indicating a terrace of houses. I shall play that right down. At this end, I've had to open up. There's a footpath to this side of the house, and another flanking wall here, which would have concealed the conservatory, such as it was, altogether. So what I've chosen to do here is actually move elements in the drawing, in the composition, so that pier is moved a little bit further out, so that I can just get a glimpse, but not too much, of the conservatory. So I'm spared having to try and evoke the details, which I just don't know what they were like, of that particular part of the building. So I'm using photographs, but I'm also having to use my imagination and manipulate things so that the important aspects of the image are what we concentrate on when we're looking at it. So that's just one of the ways that I would have to be using photographs, and I do use them. I do use a camera to help me with my work. So we've got a State of the Nation report to make here. This is some of the images which you've seen me working on, which I've brought up to a finer finish, and we'll be photographing and framing, which we may get the opportunity to have a look at doing. Here you'll see that I've had to be very careful about managing the balance of the image, but I think the focus on that sort of little patch of red in the middle was still the important thing as far as the colouring is concerned. Every other part of the scene is relatively muted colours, and you'll see that after, again, this is something which is not how you would be told to do proper watercolours, but you'll see that there's quite a lot of white gouache employed to give highlights on splashes of water and flags and little touches here and there, as is this one, where we've added what we would describe as staffage. That is all the sort of activity, the figures in the scene. This is I've constructed this out of the top of my head, really. The scene, obviously, as you saw, was sketched on site, but a lot of the rest of it was just out of my imagination, apart from one or two of these figures in the foreground. And traditionally, this, if you were painting with oil paints, this kind of thing would be added at a late stage in the construction of a painting. With watercolour, the idea is that you work this out at a much earlier stage and let the white of the paper create create your highlights, not paint them. But I've done a combination of both things here, and worked with watercolour pencils in the foliage and in the sky, and on some of the figures. Sometimes, certainly in the 18th century, you got teams of artists working, one who would paint the scene, and then another coming in and painting the figures, the staffage, subsequently. Yes, so I will go on and finish this to a point where I'm happy with it, and then I always also, not all artists do, but I choose to put the mounts and the frames on these myself, so I've got a control over the whole presentation of my work. When I'm talking to art societies, I often tell them, do not do this at home. Every room of this house is full of something which is, a stored item or work in progress or reference material, or everywhere you look, there's some part of the process is included. But for the sake of describing what the creative process involved with the production of the painting is concerned, that is what this is intended to show. I could go on and spend as long going through the business of mounting, conservation, framing, and looking after presenting, exhibiting, and selling, and marketing, and everything else that's involved. But I think you've had enough of me now.